Hello and welcome along to another RTÉ Rugby podcast. Neil Treacy here with you as usual, joined by Bernard Jackman, and in a few minutes' time we'll also be welcoming along former Scotland international Rory Lawson to get the lowdown on the Scots ahead of this weekend's game at Murrayfield. First though, myself and Birch will run you through the main talking points from last weekend's URC, because it was a great weekend for the Irish provinces. 4 wins out of 4, Munster 47, 42 winners against the Scarlets. And then on Saturday, 3 away wins, Leinster beating Edinburgh 47-27, Connacht 22-20 winners against the Dragons, and Ulster 42-20 winners away to Cardiff. Even better as well still for Connacht and Munster by the fact that the Stormers beat the Sharks and the Lions upset the Bulls. So that is a great weekend all round for the provinces, Birch. And as I said, in particular, Connacht and Munster with what happened down in South Africa.
Yeah, that was a very a big surprise result for the Lions, who've been struggling a little bit to beat the Bulls in the South African derby, and just opens up that opportunity again for Connacht and gives everyone else a little bit more breathing space. So I think probably at the moment during international periods, unless the Irish teams are playing the South Africans, we kind of expect to go. I expect to go 4 from 4. Glasgow, obviously, without their internationals, are a little bit weaker than the Irish, and obviously the Welsh regions and the Welsh rugby's in a bit of a mess at the moment. So, very good timing for the Irish provinces, and 4 wins is great. Even though probably Connacht's performance will worry them a little bit. They certainly weren't impressive, but they got 4 points, I suppose.
Yeah, I'll start on that one actually, because I saw you were on the coverage as well on Saturday evening. I wasn't hanging around to get your thoughts after the match, because I'd watched back-to-back games at home in Limerick, and I think my mother was dying to get the remote control out of my hand. But that Connacht win, look, it's a good win away from home. It is exactly what they needed to get back above Benetton after their win on Saturday as well. I'm not mad on putting down the league, but the last 20 minutes of that game was as bad a game of rugby as I can remember in a long time.
Yeah, look, Connacht shouldn't be lacking confidence, because they've had a decent win against the Lions, decent win against the Sharks. They won a big win in Zebra, even though it wasn't a perfect performance, but I think they scored over 50 points. So Connacht should have been very comfortable in that game. Dragons, that was their 8th loss in a row. They looked like a team who didn't have any confidence, didn't really know how to win. And yes, Connacht are probably lucky to hang on. They certainly, played the game in the wrong areas at the end. They were under the pump, even though, and to be honest, Dragons looked like they had a man extra rather than the other way around. Obviously, Matthew Screech, the Dragons lock, got sent off in the 35th minute. And yeah, I think it was worrying. Look, Jack Carty put out before the game, there was a bit of stuff going on in the background of Connacht with contracting, and some high profile players leaving on, so maybe there's a little bit of unrest there, or change is never easy, but it certainly wouldn't inspire you that, even though they have an easy fixture list to finish, bar that away game to Glasgow, or bar Glasgow at the end in the last round, it wouldn't inspire you that they're full throttle at the moment, and to be honest, that's probably a game they would have fancied 5 points before the game, and particularly when Dragons were down to 13 for about 7 or 8 minutes, not to capitalize on that. In actual fact, they conceded a try during that period. It was a performance full of flaws.
Yeah, but as you said, the flip side is the fixtures list coming ahead of them. 3 games remaining in the regular season. They're in the top 8. They're within 2 points of the Sharks, who slipped up at the weekend. And you look at the games they have left: home against Edinburgh, home against Cardiff, and the toughest one, obviously, away to Glasgow in the final round, which will probably actually decide whether they're finishing 7th or 9th in the table if they can pick up 2 wins otherwise. So, I suppose they're at a stage in the season where results are probably a bit more important than performances.
Yeah, they are. Look, and they got the win, another win on the road. It's the first time, I think, ever that Connacht have won 4 in a row in this domestic competition, which is shows you that they have struggled for consistency, and this is obviously a personal best for them. So I don't want to be too hard on them, but I think we have to call it as we see it. It just was a game they were very, very lucky to win. I mean, Sam Davies has a kick on the right side. He's a left footer. He normally slots, just misses the post, and then hits the crossbar hits the post with a drop goal. Has another drop goal attempt. But I think the biggest one was Ashton Hewitt had a 2-man overlap, and he went himself and got held up, which is good scramble defence. But they were lucky to be in that position at the end where Sam Davies needed a drop goal because Dragons had other chances to score.
Yeah, who knows? By the end of the season, that could be an absolutely massive 4 points. We'll find out in about 6 or 7 weeks. But going back to Friday night, Munster 47-42 winners against the Scarlets in one of the most bonkers games I can remember. A lesson to us all, Bernard. If you ever write match reports, don't ever try write something at halftime, no matter how certain the result looks. All right, because you're going to regret it in the final 5 minutes.
I got caught today. Sexton got a drop goal in France, so I nearly had the whole thing written. And next thing, it was a late deadline. It was a tight deadline. I had to start from scratch. But no, the game at the moment it favors attack. I mean, defense is optional in some games, and in fairness to Munster, they set their stall out this summer in terms of they want to be a better attacking side, and I think their attack looks really, really sharp. And they ripped the Scarlets apart, and there's a real confidence, a real good vibe there. I think it's Scarlets when they want to attack can be good, and they have improved. In fairness, since Lee Blackett, the Wasp coach, has come into the coaching staff. So I thought Scarlets were very poor early in the season, but they're on a bit of a run at the moment of form, and they showed in the second half that they are probably the best Welsh team. I think at the moment in terms of danger. And Munster probably just eased off mentally, and that's something that Roundtree will be able to talk to them about without the pain of having lost a game or not getting 5 points out of it. So it's probably not a bad lesson for Munster to have. Tough week for them obviously off the field as well, and maybe they're just emotionally drained. And I don't know. I'm sure there's some. It's either they switched off or it was just an emotional week, and they were just physically drained, and they just ran out of a bit of juice. But I think Munster are trucking along quite nicely for us.
I might just get you to pick up the earpiece there, because I think that is the microphone part on that. It was probably pulling away from your mouth a little bit.
Okay,
no, perfect. You sound a bit better there.
Yeah.
I'll just come in on Munster then.
I'll go again, yeah.
But no, even I'll just pick up from what you just said at the end there. Yeah, and you mentioned the attack there for Munster. Particularly, I thought Shane Daly and Calvin Nash in the first half in particular, it was really, really interesting to see what they were doing with them. Like, they were in off the wings so much, and they were causing the Scarlets a huge amount of danger. And just even if you look at the table where they are now, 5th in the table, they got the game against Glasgow coming up in a couple of weeks' time, and if they win that, they're into the top 4. And when you see what happened in South Africa as well, there's a nice bit of daylight between them and the Bulls in 6th place, and they got 4th right in their sights.
Yeah, brilliant, and absolutely, and they have the quarterfinal or the European match against the Sharks in Durban to look forward to, knockout rugby. So I think they'll be very excited about this end of the season, and it's a huge turnaround from where they were to start. Obviously losing away to the Dragons, etc. But I've been really impressed with Graham Roundtree, and his coaching staff, Leamy, Prendergast, Kiraku. They didn't panic at that time. They just said, look, this is what we need to do. There's going to be pain. We need to change players' minds around how to play the game. And in fairness, Johan had a. It was because Johan was there so long. I think it became ingrained, and coaches can influence players' philosophies around the game. So Mike Prendergast and Roundtree had to reteach them, a different way of playing, and it took a little while for everyone to hit their straps. But now it's also some personnel as well have really come into their own. Paddy Patterson is well suited to this type of game. Frisch looks, so dangerous ball in hand in those outside channels, whether it's his own pace or whether it's his offloading ability, or we saw him using that physicality to run over people at the weekend. And Fekitoa has found a bit of form as well. So and that's given the likes of Nash and Daly, really good opportunities. And it's very similar to Ireland, where Prendergast doesn't want his wings to hold with. I mean, they're going for the ball, and they often create opportunities where both wings are connected, and running at tight 5 forwards and stressing them. So it's it's very similar to Leinster and Ireland, but there's a reason for that, because it works. It works, and I think Munster, that dressing room must be absolutely buzzing at the moment.
Yeah, particularly with RG Snyman back as well. It was a great reception for him when he came on in the second half. On Leinster, very routine win, 15 out of 15 now, and they're pretty much coasting their way to top spot and top seed for the playoffs. But we did get to see another great variation on the 5 meter tap and go. And the beauty of all of this is that every time they come up with another little version of this, it just creates another bit of uncertainty in a defense where they're lining up wondering, okay, what's the shape doing here? Where are players standing? What are we going to expect? And it's probably why you end up seeing Dan Sheehan scoring that try against Munster, where he just tipped and ran and made it the whole way to the line, because you have that uncertainty.
Yeah, the opposition would be surprised if they just do a traditional quick tap and just carry, you know what I mean, into a pick and go. They'll probably do that again just to calm everyone down soon. But look, I think they're enjoying it. They're enjoying the creativity to it. They've also been very efficient, very accurate, you know. So they're obviously spending a lot of time walking through it, explaining people's role. And the one at the weekend to open up that hole for Scott Penny was beautifully created, you know. They go away from an area and then come back to it, you know, late with someone of his power hitting it at pace. And obviously, you know, Edinburgh weren't able to stop it. And that game, in fairness, Edinburgh started well, but Leinster never panicked. They just, you know, just built the score. And at the end, it was very one-sided. And it's testament to these lads who don't always play, how quickly they can look at the speed of the game. Whereas I think sometimes now at the moment, especially during the international period, you're seeing lads who haven't had a lot of game time, maybe playing in the competition underneath the URC in their country, so in the Welsh Premiership, or is it the Super Six in Scotland, and it doesn't look like it's preparing them properly for that level of rugby. Whereas, you know, the Leinster lads, for all he come back from injury, he's just ready. And I think the S&C coaches, the medical teams in the Irish provinces do an incredible job of getting fellas match fit, which, you know, historically it took a couple of games, you know, to be at your best. They're able to come in, you know, and that's why, from an Irish point of view, if Furlong starts on Sunday, you know, we need him to be at his best pretty much straight away. And you'd have confidence in the Irish system that we do give players that environment to be ready to go.
Yeah, certainly. And then Ulster, another good win as well for them at the weekend. They seem to have picked themselves back up after their rough spot. But I think the part of the win that everyone was just delighted to see, Jacob Stockdale finally getting back in and scoring a try, and most brilliantly as well, he scored what I think everyone would call the Jacob Stockdale try, where he gets the ball out in the edge, puts that little chip over the top and judges the bounce brilliantly and manages to score. Look, whatever comes of it for him, whether he ends up in a World Cup squad down the line or anything like that, you know, all that remains to be seen. But for someone who's just been through so much, it was great to see him getting back and looking like his old self again.
Yeah, and look, he's played so little over 2 years, and I do think he just needed something like that to happen to just, I suppose, reconfirm to him of his quality. Like he's a world class finisher, and that was a world class finish. Probably when he kicked it, it was like, there's no obvious space in behind. It wasn't a kick and chase where he was going to outspeed everybody. He needed that bounce to bounce exactly as it did, and it was a phenomenal finish for him. And I think that'll settle him down and give him a big boost of self-belief. When he makes the World Cup squad, obviously he's so much to offer, particularly, you know, the fact that Ireland are so reliant on having a left footer in that back three. But if James Lowe's fit, I don't see Stockdale making it back in. Just looking at some of the people who are just a little bit ahead of him, even like Jordan Armour, etc., probably just have enough done this season to just keep ahead of him, unless he has a massive end of season. But I think, you know, that would be a bonus for him. But I think for him, just getting back on the field, knowing he still has the ability, you know, he's loads of time left to get back into the Irish team.
Yeah, he still has another couple of World Cup cycles ahead of him at any rate if he stays fit. But that's where we'll leave it on the URC for now. It's a couple of breaks until we're back into action on the 24th. Big game, top two. Leinster against Stormers on Friday the 24th, followed by Connacht against Edinburgh, Munster and Glasgow, and Ulster versus the Bulls. Few fixtures there with some big playoff ramifications. So that's when the URC is back on the weekend of the 24th and 25th of March. We'll take a quick break here, and when we come back, we'll have Rory Lawson and Birch talking all things Scotland, Ireland. Welcome back. So I'm delighted to be joined by Rory Lawson, former Scotland scrum-half, who's hopped on the line to talk to myself and Birch about Scotland Ireland this Saturday or this Sunday afternoon at Murrayfield, 3:00 kickoff live on RT2 and RTÉ Player. Rory, thanks a million for joining us on the RTÉ Rugby podcast.
No, thanks for having me, Neil. If the weather is going to be anything on Sunday like it is today, then we'd be in for a cracker. Having said that, I'm not sure it's looking ideal, but look, I think whatever the case, the sense of anticipation from both sides, from Scotland and from Ireland, I think is going to set us up for an absolute belter of a game.
Yeah, it certainly will, and that kind of tees it up interestingly for kind of how I was going to lead into you with. It's been a while since there's been this much legitimate kind of hope and expectation around Scotland. We've had it at the start of tournaments before, and things have faded away, but it seems like after 3 solid performances, granted one of them was a defeat, but it was arguably their best all-round performance. I think Gregor Townsend would probably say against France. That what's the sense over there with Ireland coming into town? Is it a sense of hope or is it a sense of expectation?
Well, I think the sense is and the knowledge is that you've got the number 1 team in the world coming over to Scotland. So I think there's a natural excitement to from a fan base and from a player base, I think, because you always want to be able to measure yourself against the best. And Ireland have shown the quality that they have. They were far from perfect against Italy, but there were a few changes in there, and also it's a measure of how far Italy have come on. But you're coming up against a side who have gone down to New Zealand and won a Test series and are 3 from 3 in the Six Nations Championship, on track for a Grand Slam. So there is absolutely no doubt at all that Scotland know what's coming. With that, hope versus expectation, I think naturally people would say they expect Scotland to put in a performance that really challenges Ireland. And I think if you look back to the first press conference that Gregor Townsend had ahead of this Six Nations, he said his demands on the squad are to try and find consistency of performance. It's about trying to find that. And I think that's what we've seen from Scotland through the opening 3 rounds, that there has been a consistency of performance. There has been a cohesion, the most used word when it comes to Gregor Townsend's side, and from the fans and media and so on, they're talking about this cohesion. You can see that Scotland seem to be on the same page, and with that consistency and cohesion comes the ability to challenge teams. And yeah, they didn't get the job done in France. 19-0 down, they still pushed France hard, but they'll be under no illusions as to the quality of Ireland coming to Murrayfield, but they'll believe that if they put in their best performance, they'll ask some big questions of this side.
And the cohesion is the big one. And another thing you mentioned there was a press conference at the start of the tournament, because I had reason to kind of think back in my head to the round 5 game last year in Dublin when Scotland really fell flat at the Aviva Stadium. And I remember being in the press conference afterwards, and Gregor Townsend was there and Stuart Hogg was there, and the atmosphere, I have to say, like, it was as bad as I can remember being at a post-match press conference. There was kind of almost bickering back and forth between Hogg and journalists, and I remember thinking at the time, like, there's no way back for this team. Like, they are so far off where a top 5, top 10, or top 6 or 7 team in the world should be, or a Six Nations challenger should be. But in the 12 months since then, it seems relationships have certainly improved. The kind of atmosphere around the team has improved. And as you say, the cohesion and the performances have greatly improved. What has happened in the last 12 months to take us from the Aviva Stadium in March last year to where we are now?
Well, I think there's a lot. There's a lot of hard work that's been put into moving the dial on that front. When I think back to then, I was in Rome the week before for that Scotland win out there, and then it was obviously Ali Price's 50th cap. They got the charter home that evening to be able to give them the optimum chance of recovery. in a shorter turnaround heading into that round 5 match. And there was the fallout. There was the fallout with the small group of players who headed into town, and you heard all of the gossip and thoughts and stories around what had happened, who had said what and where. Now, I think the people got it wrong. Now, at what level those mistakes were made, I'm still not sure, and it doesn't really bother me anymore. The reality is that they've dealt with it. They've addressed the issue. The summer tour, which was the next opportunity for Gregor to get his hands on the squad, they obviously went down to Argentina without a load of the Lions guys who were given the summer off, which included the likes of Stuart Hogg to be able to put himself back together, get a little bit of surgery. Finn Russell had some time off. And I think as a result, that was also an opportunity for Gregor Townsend to hand some responsibility to some of the maybe not lesser leaders, but less experienced leaders, possibly to step up and really take ownership of what was happening within the squad. And it was an interesting tour. They lost the first test that they should never have lost, and then there were challenges for Scotland, but at the same time they've probably grown through it. And I think this Six Nations, I spoke to Finn back in the November tests actually, and at that point he said that he and Gregor sat down and that they were on the same page, and that never have those words rung truer than when you start seeing Scotland playing now, because they're the two guys. The coach delivers the vision and the strategy to his players, but if you've got key men in key decision-making positions, and you look at Ireland, either with Gibson Park and Sexton, or Murray and Sexton, or whatever, they know how Farrell wants to play the game, and they deliver that because they're on the same page, and they know that they're the people who on field deliver that performance. I could see this time last year there was a disparity between where Gregor Townsend was and Finn Russell was. There was a clash. And that carried on field. But this season you can clearly see that there is a shared picture as to what that looks like. And if Gregor Townsend draws the outline of the picture, Finn Russell has got the colouring in pens to be able to colour it the way that he knows Gregor wants it to be delivered. And when you've got those two people on the same track, the others all understand their role and responsibility in making that tick. And you can see it with Scotland with ball in hand look like they all understand what they're doing. The carriers, the options, the clearing men, the kick chase, all of the counter attack, all of these things seem to be much clearer, and people seem to be on the same page. And with that, you're able to build consistency. So I think it's a long way of saying that a lot of work's been put in, but they're starting to see that work come to fruition now with that consistency of performance. And Scotland have always said on their day they can challenge anybody, and more often than not now they're having days whereby they can challenge the team no matter how good they are. And yeah, they won't win them all, but they'll certainly run people close.
And Bert, just ask a question on that. Sorry, Neil. Rory, I think I can see exactly what you're saying in terms of how Scotland are performing, and I think they're probably the best Scottish team that I've seen for a long time. I just remember back to when Gregor got the job. The SRU decided that he was the man to replace Fern quite far out. And I was speaking to a New Zealand friend of mine who said Liam MacDonald is interviewed for the Scotland job to replace Gregor after the World Cup. What is the risk of the SRU not backing Gregor now in terms of being him the guy to stay on after this World Cup and be the coach? Can they afford to wait? I know France are looking at him as the attack coach, and obviously that won't have an effect on this Sunday, but it could have an effect on the World Cup. It could have an effect on this Scottish team, being winning silverware next year or maybe this year. So just your thoughts on that. Can the SRU afford to wait to make a decision, or do you think it's a done deal and they're going to move on?
Well, I'd love to know. I'd love to be a fly on the wall at Murrayfield to know the discussions on the go. Now, I honestly don't know where things are. It's really interesting to know how performances in the Six Nations might shape things, or whether, I'd imagine. I guess if I put myself in the seat of Mark Dodson on the board at Scottish Rugby, I would want to try and keep as many opportunities open as possible and options open as possible, until the Six Nations. Now, until the end of the Six Nations. Now, and without even suggesting that where Scotland finish in the table is going to dictate whether Gregor Townsend's in the mix. Now, I'm not sure where Gregor is on that at the moment. I would have thought from his perspective, he wants to be able to secure his future, but also right now he is just living in the Six Nations bubble. He wants to drive performance from his team. He wants to get the best out of his players and his coaches and himself. And distractions like contract negotiations, whether with France or club or Scotland or whatever it might be, would only distract him from doing that job. So I'm hopeful that the lines of communication have been strong enough that people, whatever the discussions, they've been able to get onto the same page and say, let's get the Six Nations done, but within a 2-week period after the Six Nations, we want to be really clear as to who our next person is in line. Now, naturally, there'll be the World Cup is always when the gears start to crank on the coaching merry-go-round, because most international coaches' contracts run in World Cup cycles. Now, what does it look like for Gregor Townsend? If Gregor Townsend signs a new contract with Scottish Rugby, I would imagine that would be a four-year contract to take him through to Australia in 27. Now, that being the case, he would have been in the job for 10 years. And that's a long time for a head coach to be in a role. Now, I don't know what Gregor's own ambitions are as a coach. He's obviously he's probably living the dream at the moment of being Scotland's head coach, but he will also have further targets that he would have set himself. So it'll be interesting to see how that works, where Scottish Rugby's take is on things. Do they feel that there needs to be a fresh voice and fresh ideas for a new cycle? Because let's not forget, there are a number of players who after this World Cup will certainly not play a part in the next World Cup. Now, whether that's your Richie Grays or guys like Fraser Brown, or the likes of Stuart Hogg, Finn Russell possibly, Chris Harris, these guys are all 30 plus now. So yes, I know that players can extend their careers and keep playing some great rugby. Look at Johnny Sexton as a great example. But it'll be interesting to see how that whole picture comes into deciding who is next in line for Scotland. But I think now the beauty is that for the Scottish job is one that I think more coaches would want now, more global coaches would want now than they have done ever before, because they can see the quality of player and performance that is building.
Birch, I might put one to you on Gregor Townsend. Even aside from the various things and improvements Scotland have made on the pitch, how impressed have you been with the way he's handled things off the pitch, just with various situations, like dealing with Finn Russell and mending that relationship over the last year, or how he handled the situation with Stuart Hogg and captaincy, where he's essentially moved it on to Jamie Ritchie, but Stuart Hogg doesn't seem to have been put out by this enormously. He's probably playing steadier, consistent rugby, where he's probably not having playing the 9s and 10s that he had in the past, but he's not having the poor performances either. He's probably more in the middle of the road getting those performances. How have you been impressed by what Gregor Townsend has done just to manage the squad?
I've been really impressed. I mean, obviously he didn't pick Finn in November, probably misread the room saying it was because of form. But injuries allowed Finn come back in, and they repaired that. And I think that's what really good coaches do. They show they're fallible and admit they made an error, or maybe that was what was needed to have that clear the air chat, which has now led us to it seems as if there's been really good alignment between Gregor and Finn. And Finn is a big part of what Scotland do. Even though I think that they've found some real powerful athletes, I thought their pack stood up really well to a monstrous French pack. I think some of their backs are as powerful as anyone in world rugby. They still want to be a team who play fast and take chances. And Finn Russell, is a key to that. How Stuart Hogg, who's making his 100 cap, and this weekend is an amazing achievement. 3 Lions tours, hasn't been the talking point on the field, like Duane van der Merwe, etc., or Hugh Jones, but there's a big game in him, and he's been very consistent, as you say. And I like it. I think he's done a good job, and probably I know Rory's saying. 4 more years would be 10 years, and that's a long time. But I do feel that he's very comfortable now as an international coach, and has probably learnt a lot about these players individually, but also how to go to a World Cup or how to try and close out games. And I think Scotland are in a very good place.
Neil, I think just to come in on, Hoggy, there's not a person in the world who has a senior role who would be comfortable with being demoted. But I think Hoggy, the way that he's dealt with it, just shows the class of the guy. I think he's misunderstood, and I get really frustrated when people, the first thing they say about him is the hairline and the new gnashers. But I think for me, he's a really experienced guy who loves nothing more than representing his country. And he had a candid conversation with Gregor when he was told that he wasn't going to captain the squad anymore. And he felt the first thing he needed to focus on was getting the best out of himself and taking a step away from the leadership group as a whole in order to do that, but also understanding his responsibility and driving standards and providing a point of reference for some of the younger players to be able to go to and share experiences and challenge, because he's a guy that he's grown so much, Hoggy. I remember when he first came through the system, I was playing, and he was, he had massive swag to him. He really, he was verging on the arrogance because this self-belief that he had. And actually, in a sad way, the external noise around him knocked a bit of that out of him. But he knows what he stands for, and he knows why he's in that Scotland squad, and he knows where he adds value. And it was a bump, there's no doubt. It was a hit to his ego, it was a hit to his confidence to lose the captaincy. But after a bit of time of reflection, he's able to stand up and say, you know what? I know where my value add is. I know my own value, full stop. And now I've just got to focus all of my energy on being as good as I can be and bringing others with me, even without that title. So he stepped up, shown his class. Finn, whether it's the conversation he's had around the table with Gregor, learning from his mistakes, or, recently becoming a dad of a daughter, all of these things come into play when it comes to the growth of people. And Gregor's massive on that as well. He's got a growth mindset. He's somebody who's always looking to get better and better, but he also realizes that people are human, right? We all make mistakes. We're very few of us are at our best every single day. And actually, if you make mistakes and learn and move forward, then you've got the opportunity to change things positively.
And Rory, the important thing then for Scotland is in the last 12 months, the supporting cast around Finn Russell and Stuart Hogg has grown and grown in confidence. And you probably alluded to as to why with the tour in Argentina where Finn and Stuart Hogg didn't go. But, in the Six Nations, we've seen the likes of Tuipulotu and Hugh Jones brilliant in the centre. And Birch mentioned some of the forwards like Pierre Scoom and George Turner. Xander and Matt Fagerson have been carrying really well. And Richie Gray as well, who it seems was yesterday's man for the last few years, but all of a sudden is playing like a player reborn.
Yeah, I mean, Richie, he's a phenomenal specimen. He's a phenomenal athlete. I think if you met Richie and got to know him as a guy, he's incredibly laid back. I mean, he is. If you were going to base your perception on him on what he's like off field, you'd get him all wrong, because he's horizontal, so laid back, not a care in the world, but he is incredibly driven. He is a high performance athlete. He's done it at the top end of pretty much every league in Europe, and he's really understood how to get the best out of himself. I think the coaches around him, both at club and international level, have been able to tap into his experience and also allow him to be himself. And I think he's shown some absolutely amazing moments throughout the championship so far. He gets on with the hard work. His work rate is exceptional, like his brother. But the big thing that jumps for me was the speed of hands in the outside channel against England to give Duhan van der Merwe the chance of a one-on-one, or turned out to be a 1-on-3, but that's okay for Duhan. But otherwise, that attack would have been shut down, and I think he's really stepped up. As Bert says, there's loads of other guys across the board. Even Jamie Ritchie, he's a guy that just quietly goes about his business. Captains, speaks to the referee well. He rarely does the flashy stuff, but he understands that if he doesn't do his job, then guys like Hugh Jones and Finn Russell aren't able to do theirs to the maximum effectiveness. So I think it's been across all 3 match days, it's been a 23-man effort and beyond with the squad. But I think tying into that, Gregor's also been afforded the opportunity to keep consistency of selection, just making minor tweaks. And if you look at the best teams now in Ireland and France, there's that consistency of selection whereby you've got the combinations with the ability to understand each other that much more, and the match minutes and at the very top end of the game, because that big games come down to fine margins, and with experience and cohesion, those fine margins can go your way versus chopping and changing things.
Birch, for 20 minutes now we've been plumosing Scotland with compliments. I'm going to ask you now, what are the areas of their team that Ireland can expose on Sunday?
Look, I think their defence has got much better under Steve Tandy, but I think the way they conceded those opening scores against France will give Ireland a little bit of comfort. I know Ireland didn't defend well against Italy, and I said I don't think Scotland are a poor team defensively at all, but Ireland's attack has been so good over the last year that we have found opportunities against pretty much every defence. So that's something obviously we've got to go to. I think Ireland will, with Sexton back in, which I think is going to happen. They'll play that kicking game quite well that England did for long periods, but obviously they'll be very conscious of having to make sure they're very detailed on their kick chase and shut down that counter-attack opportunity, which Scotland are probably the best at. There's no obvious weakness. I'm saying that we hope we can open up some holes defensively, but it's not something that's very transparent or very consistent. But certainly France did exploit quick very well. In Ireland, they don't tend to need a lot of chances at the moment, and they're playing with a real fluidity. So it's going to be an incredibly tough game. But I think this Irish team, they seem very, very confident, very settled, and hopefully we're good enough to go and get an away win.
Rory, what would your general sense be of Sunday? Is there an area of Scotland that you think Ireland would be able to expose?
Well, I think Birch mentioned Ireland with the ball are just so difficult to stop. They have threats all across the field. Close channels, midfield, wide channels, good kicking game. The nuts and bolts of their game are so strong, and then off the back of that, you've got this understanding as to how they want to play, the fluency, the skills and ability to look after the ball. I mean, Scotland will have to be armed, each player with a double crowbar, to be able to get the ball off Ireland. They are so good at looking after it. Very rarely waste opportunities, and particularly Ireland are number one in the world because their effectiveness and clinical nature in the final quarter is easily the best in the world. innovation, the ideas, the power game, the speed of ball, the decision making, all 5 of those contributing factors feed opportunity after opportunity. And, we've seen it with, whether it's Andrew Porter or Caelan Doris in the tight channels, or in the wide channels, Hugo Keenan or James Lowe, or, I could name 23 players who all have an ability to impact the game. And I think so therefore, looping things right back to Birch's comments and your question, Neil, it's Scotland have to bar up physically, because Ireland, every time Ireland face Scotland, and I've spoken to a number of ex-Ireland players, they just say, we'll win the physical battle. And if we win the physical battle, we'll win the game. So if Scotland are second best physically, they won't win the game. They've got to match Ireland or better Ireland in the physical battles. And beyond that, they've got to starve them keep them to as few opportunities in the final quarter as possible. And with that, you need excellent discipline. So getting that balance between, defensive line speed and physicality to take the momentum away from Ireland, but also keeping discipline when you're trying to challenge for ruck ball to slow it down, because that Ireland with quick ruck ball are going to cause any defence in the world problems. Managing that discipline, because that if Ireland get a penalty early on within 45 metres of Scotland line, I would not be surprised in the slightest if they go for the corner and say, here we go, we're setting our marker right here. We're going to bang it into the corner. We're going to set up a maul. We're going to attack, and we're going to squeeze the life out of Scotland and make a statement in the opening exchanges. So the only chance you have of avoiding that, for me, is keeping yourself really clean in discipline. Pick your battles when you challenge for ball, but also understand whereby you'll be better with men on feet just getting the line speed. So I think it's the physical battle is always where it's going to come down to. Set piece is going to be really crucial, as it always is. If Scotland get that right, Ireland could still win the game. Make no bones about it, because they don't need many opportunities to score points, Ireland.
And just finally, then, before I get a prediction from you, is it almost a case of, like, without being patronising towards Scotland, but is a losing bonus point defeat where Scotland really put it up to Ireland and go out and put in a dominant performance next week against Italy? Would that ultimately culminate in a pretty decent Six Nations, all things considered, for Scotland?
You ask any player in the Scotland squad.
Yeah, the players aren't going to agree with that, obviously.
Whether they accept a losing bonus point at Murrayfield in a Six Nations game, it will take less than 1/100th of a second to get the answer.
I won't get back out of the changing room.
Yeah, and look, Scotland will believe they can win on Sunday. There is no doubt about that. They will. They're incredibly proud. What an opportunity! First time in forever that Scotland are going after a triple crown. That'll add an extra bit. The key thing for me has got to be the opening quarter. Scotland have to get out the blocks. You can't be points down to 19 points down to France and Paris. They come back, they get within a score. They threw away a couple of opportunities against Ireland. Ireland are, for me, the best team in the world at defending a lead. So Scotland have to start well to have any chance. I do believe that Scotland, with their best performance, could win the game. I think, and plus the fact now we saw it in Paris. The high shots, the red cards, this kind of thing. Anything can happen in there. That aside, I think Scotland, with their best performance, can really stress and challenge Ireland. They'll want 4 points. They'll know that they'll probably need 5, because they'll need to score a lot of points to beat Ireland. So I think, if Scotland had come into this championship being offered 3 from 5 wins in the championship, I think they'd still say, "Nah, we want 4. We've got 3 home games and we expect to pick up one on the road." So it would be a satisfactory Six Nations, if not a great Six Nations.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. Final call then. What's your head telling you? What's your heart telling you for Sunday?
My head's telling me that Scotland will push Ireland close, but it will be, I don't know, somewhere. But Ireland by 6 to 8 points, maybe. My heart says that Scotland have got the bit between their teeth at the moment, and can really pressurise and stress Ireland, and that it might go the other way by a couple of points. But that is coming back to your very first question of this pod. That is in hope, probably, rather than expectation.
Birch, what's your head telling you?
I'd be pretty similar, to be honest. I think we could lose this game if things fall right for Scotland. If we're not on the ball defensively, I really admire their attack. I think the balance they have with their attack is phenomenal. And starts with Ben White, who's been really impressive at 9, and the centre combination. They've got firepower in the wing, and I said Hogg's been quiet, but there's a magic moment in him. So I think we'll just about get there, to be honest. I think, we probably are used to, we're in a really good winning run. There's really good belief, and that'll be enough to help us just sneak a win.
All right. 2 just about Ireland wins are probably being predicted. That's what I'm getting here. So that's 3:00 on Sunday afternoon. Scotland against Ireland at Murrayfield, live on RT2 and RT Player, and also live commentary on the radio on RT Radio 1. On Saturday, then you've got Italy against Wales 2:15, followed by England against France 4:45 at Twickenham. But that's where we leave it on the RTÉ Rugby podcast. Birch, thank you as always.
Thanks, guys.
And Rory, thanks a million for joining us.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks, Birch. Thanks for having me.
See you, boys.